Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve Ramona and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve Ramona.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I'm fired up to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of doing business in life with a servant's heart. When you approach your work in life that way, you're going to make a difference and an impact. And it's so awesome when you do that. By the way, my guest is going to talk about impact in many cool ways. Also, this podcast is developed to inspire, motivate, and educate you. So you could take this podcast, take it out to your world, and make a difference as well. And while you're listening to my incredible guests today, I want you to think about how you're going to serve yourself today and others and what impact you'll create today. Don't wait on that. Start doing that today. And it could be really small or really big. If you want to go out and give $1,000 to your church, that's a service. If you want to just, go to the grocery store and help a little old lady put her groceries in her car, that's service too. There's no scoreboard on this. That's only in sports. So think about that as you're listening to my guest today. And I want to thank my incredible sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Would you like to be part of an exclusive community of high-income, successful business owners and entrepreneurs from very diverse industries? Together, they're building a thought leader platform to impact and change the world. And I always end it with that because we're going to talk about impact and change the world with a servant's heart. I think the easiest way to make an impact, but it's like getting gifts every day or giving gifts out every day. I want to welcome to the show, Matthew or Matt. Welcome.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
And as we talked about before the show, this is not Matt Kemp, the Padre Dodger baseball player. This is Matt Kemp, the vet, who I want to thank you for your service, by the way. I appreciate that. I'm sure the audience does as well. Your military background is pretty extensive and it's pretty recent. What have you learned from that to help you grow your businesses?
As I got into the entrepreneur space and talking to other entrepreneurs, both veteran and non-veteran entrepreneurs, I realized that it's not the most genius or the most creative folks that are the most successful. It's the ones that execute the best. And executing on a plan is something that falls, directly in line with, not only the military in general, but especially the infantry that I was in. So once you realize that you do have the same skill sets as other successful entrepreneurs, just by what's either been beaten into you or that you learned, willingly. Yeah. But you spend a number of years in the military, you know how to execute. So that was a huge realization for me once I got into the space. Now it's figuring out how to best execute.
Yeah, and taking action for us civilians. Execute is, because some people go, what's execute? Well, it's taking action. It's just a military term. I love that you said that because I watch Shark Tank, haven't in a while, but there's some products and services out there like just unbelievable, but they go, you didn't execute it right. You're asking for too much money. Talk about that when it comes to taking the action, executing. What's the first couple steps they need to do properly?
Well, so I look at it from two different ways. And let's go back to a military analogy. Whenever you're going into a room that could possibly have bad guys in it, do you go right or left? Well, the only wrong decision is no decision at all. So sometimes it's more detrimental to make no decision than just picking a direction. So whenever you look at folks that have this great product or this great service, sometimes they just don't do anything, or they do so very little that it's just as good as not doing anything. So one thing that I've really had to focus on was short-term goals, long-term goals. Are the long-term goals achievable? Are the short-term goals executing towards the long-term goal? Because you can just throw numbers out like, I want to do $1 million in revenue in 2025. Okay, well, what are the steps between here and there? What are you doing today, this week, this month? So that's what I have found for me, because I have to live and die by my calendar, because if it's not on the calendar or if it's not on my to-do list, like it goes right out the window. And then I really realize a month down the road, oh, holy cow, I forgot to do this. Or
Yeah.
so I'm a big believer in short-term execution, journeying towards long-term goals.
I love that, because the $1 million is really a dream. If you're
Mhm.
making 50,000 a year in 2024 and you're going to go to 1 million, that's your dream. It may not put a time frame on it, but what's your goal? Okay, I want to double my income next year, so I want to go to 100,000, or whatever that number is. I like that, and I like the action about no action, because I
Mhm.
tell people all the time, making the wrong action, you can pivot. You
Mhm.
take no action, and podcast hosts are a perfect example. I've talked to many guys I've helped. It's been months they haven't started their podcast. Well, who could they have met? What could have happened in those months? Take action. I love it. Talk about leadership, because it's talked about everywhere, but in the military, it's a unique experience.
Well, I got kind of a crash course in it, because I was a 22-year-old staff sergeant. So
Mm.
I joined the Army at 18, made sergeant at 20, and then staff sergeant at 22. So I was in charge of an 11-man infantry squad in West Baghdad at the age of 22, 23, 24.
Mm.
So baptism by fire is one way to go about it. But one thing that the best advice that I got as a private in the Army was, for the rest of your career, you're going to have poor leadership and you're going to have fantastic leadership. Always make note of each, so that you can add that to how you grow into the leader that you're going to be. Keep all of those good things to heart, to know that you need to absolutely do those, and how they'll positively affect everybody in your team or squad. And then never forget the bad leadership. So as soon as you start seeing yourself becoming something similar to that, to hard stop, look inward, like let's figure out. And that has even, there's a lot of juxtaposition between Army leadership, between entrepreneurship, and even parenting too. You're trying to, there's a lot of military folks that will directly relate privates in the military to children. And it's very true. So sometimes you have to give some very defined rules. You have to do some very strong hands-on leadership, but it's really just about learning from your past experiences, learning from past leaders that you've had, good and the bad, and making sure that's what's helping you grow into who you want to be.
Yeah. Humbleness is something I've learned from military vets that I've talked to. Like Otis told us a story about a high general came to his staff and said, I made a mistake. And I'm telling you guys, and it's rampant across military. Be humble, admit those mistakes. And what's interesting, I want you to talk about that, because he could have had many people die making that mistake. Here as an entrepreneur running my podcast, if I make a mistake, really nobody's going to die. I'm not trying to make small, but you get where I'm going.
Right.
Why is humbleness such a big part of the military?
I think it's because the military will humble you, because the stakes are so high. Because if you fall asleep on guard, bad guys can come on your watch. If you don't clean your weapon properly, it jams in a fight. So you need to make sure that that's in working order. I think it's just the stakes real high. And I approached entrepreneurship incredibly humble. My background, that was going from the Army to college to advertising industry, and then to corporate staffing and recruiting. So whenever I started my corporate staffing firm, I had really only had, a little less than 3 years of corporate staffing experience, but I had 10 or 12 years of sales, strategic partnerships, things like that. So whenever you look at what creates a successful business owner from like an operations standpoint, I knew absolutely nothing. So I had to lean on and approach it very humbly, to ask for help, education, guidance, mentorship. Because if I just wanted to stick my chin up and say I could probably do this all on my own, I would have been 10% of the distance that I am now. So I think just having the self-agency to know, all right, I am not the most innovative entrepreneur right out of the gates. Like, I'm going to have to learn from folks, again, going to the leadership example. I want to learn from folks that I think are doing not a great job. I want to learn from folks that I think are doing a fantastic job. I want to make sure that, I'm taking all those best practices and ingraining it into my daily operations. And whenever I see somebody completely dropping the ball, I want to take note of that to make sure that I don't do the same things.
I love the fact that you said that you listen to people that make mistakes. You can learn a lot from the wrong way of doing it and going, hey, Steve Ramona did it this way. That didn't work. Well, that lesson could be taught throughout. Two words you said that I love that you said are very audience. You got to hear this: learn and ask.
Mhm.
Talk about that, because I tell people all the time, you have to ask and then learn from that ask.
I reached out to the VP of sales at a larger staffing firm last week. Took the meeting, and I basically said, as soon as we got on the call, all I want to gain from this is your perspective. I want to let you know what my ops plan is, kind of what my growth strategy is. Let's see if there's any overlap with some partnership opportunities. I'd just like to get your perspective. And he said, yeah, sounds good. So, I mean, you can't play, or you can't win unless you play. I think that's a Texas Lotto slogan or something like that.
Yeah.
You're not going to do, you're not going to get any sales if you don't do any sales. Like, you're not going to gain that. Like, nobody's going to go out of their way to get in front of you to give you best practices or advice or some encouragement, like whatever you need. Another kind of pseudo military frame of mind is, no one's going to do it for you. Whenever you look at growing your business, when you look at all of this, all your execution planning, your strategy, your sale, like, if it's up to you, nobody's going to do it for you. So it's only you. Same thing with just asking for help, asking for guidance, asking for mentorship. There's a lot of resources out there. So if you don't know about those resources, you need to get connected to folks like you, or connected to folks like me that can just say, I'm not a finance expert, but I know some really great finance stuff. I'm not a veteran-owned small business expert, but hey, here's Matt Kemp. He knows some veteran-owned small business stuff. So you're not going to know what you don't know, but you're not going to gain that knowledge if you don't ask.
It's so well said. And in this call you had last week, that's a potential competitor as well. You're kind of doing the similar things, right?
See, I take it from a different perspective. I think
Okay.
in my staffing firm, I think the biggest competitors, or my only competitors, are the Big 10, the big conglomerates that are crushing all the margins, that they're letting the clients bridge that gap between what's doable for us and what's doable for them. Like, those are the folks that I want to steal their clients from. I want to steal their top performers and coach them into getting their own LLC, so then we can be two small business that partner to take on their market share. I'm a firm believer that the rising tide raises all ships when it comes to small businesses, because for me to say, in the Fortune 500 space that my staffing firm operates in, that's all mine. Like, there's not enough room for any other with the $500 billion worth of business. Like, no, that's just all mine for the taking. Like, it's unreasonable. So I have found that networking in parallel or in the same industry has been a huge help for, again, not only growth, strategic partnerships, but you get to learn. You get to learn from somebody who's been doing this 5 years longer than you and has 50 employees. And, they've gone through all these trials and tribulations that you just haven't got to yet. So it's just the pros vastly outweigh the cons.
You have collaborators. What you described right there, collaborators.
Yep.
Audience, don't think your people's competition. And you went to my point, must have read my mind, because I hear it all the time. I can't talk to XYZ. They're my competitor. Absolutely you can. There's so many people out there. There's 360. Well, let's say there's 100 million businesses in the United States. Me and you are doing the same thing. Let's work together and split that off. You take 100, I take 100. I think we do quite well financially. Right. I don't think it would be poor and homeless.
Right.
Let's talk about Red 7 Strategy Group. What you do there. It's a great name. Tell us how you got the name. It's really cool.
So the progress that I had made in my staffing firm in 2 years, whenever I talk to other veteran business owners and I tell them my staffing firm is an approved vendor for 78 Fortune 500 companies, they go, BS. There's no way that you've done that in 2 years. And I looked back to whenever I first started, seeking out mentorship, education, all of those things. I just noticed that for the most part, education for new business owners or veteran small businesses kind of pushed everybody towards the GovCon space. And it makes sense. There's set asides for veteran owned small businesses and all that. But I had spent my career in the Fortune 500 vendor space, and that's where I wanted to go with my company. So I had used that time in between clients whenever I was just starting up to just go through the, again, proper execution of, vendor approval ops. And I made all this progress. So whenever I talk to other veteran business owners, they say, holy cow, please give me your playbook. I would love to be coached or get your consultancy. So looking at kind of the broader market in our, the veteran business market, we'll call it, I saw a big void there of folks that really could benefit from getting veteran-owned small business certifications and really benefit from becoming an approved vendor at 5, 10, 15, 20 Fortune 500 companies, and then helping them with sales ops in there. So I decided to start up the Red 7 strategy group. For the whole mission statement is just helping veteran-owned small businesses get certified to gain access to the Fortune 500 vendor ecosystem. Red 7 came from my call sign in Iraq. So I thought that was a nice plug in there. And then after I had already started the company and we had already been moving and grooving, I found out that it's also a progressive blackjack betting strategy where you leverage your advantage over the house as long as you have it, which is just a beautiful tie-in to leveraging veteran-owned small business certifications to break into the Fortune 500.
I'm going to say this and probably should, but I love blackjack. I haven't played in a couple of years. Now you got me excited to play because it is a great strategy. Because that's what I use. You and it's interesting because as you talk, you use a lot of military vernacular, which is great. Like ops and I forget the other words that you say, but I'm listening and hearing that. Somebody listening and maybe hearing the same thing. Can they do the same thing without this verbiage, this military verbiage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, it's just how you execute. I was talking to a soon-to-be veteran business owner about how much does it cost to get all of your stuff set up, and he was very surprised whenever I said, like, look, $100 on LegalZoom to get your LLC paperwork, and $100 in a commercial checking account at a bank, and $30 a month for liability insurance. And it costs nothing to get in SAM.gov and SBA, like all the veteran certifications and stuff. And he's like, are you serious? I thought it was going to be tens of thousands of dollars and like, again, you don't know what you don't know. So all of these things, really, it just comes down to executing how you're able to execute, how you want to execute. That's one of the great things about being a business owner. Whenever I communicate, it's normally to veteran business owners from coming through like the Red 7 side. So it's the long answer to your short question is yes, you can. Ops just means operations. Executing just means going through your list of things to do. You don't have to be a combat veteran to do any of this stuff. I mean, you just got to go through the motions, and it's surprisingly not as difficult as you think it is. But again, you're only going to know how doable it is for you by asking for help, asking for mentorship, seeking out that education. Because I would have thought 2 years ago to where I am now, impossible. It's just not attainable. And you can't judge your success 2 years from now. You can only execute on where you are now. And my goals that I have for the end of next year and the end of 2026, I can't get down on myself because I haven't reached my end of 2026 goal yet. Let's just execute in the now. So again, going back to the short-term execution leading to long-term goals.
I'm glad you shared that story because it is really simple to start a business, and people, vets or not, it's just is what it is. Now, should you be doing it? That's a whole different conversation.
Right.
Figure that out, because some people shouldn't be starting businesses. This just is what it is, and nothing wrong with that. But people like Matt out here are going to be able to help you. We're coming to the end. What is one thing somebody listening that's a vet that's either started a business or is thinking about it? What's that first step they should be taking or think about?
I'm just a firm believer of getting certified as a veteran-owned small business. And this applies to minority-owned business, woman-owned small business. Like just the doors that a federal and state certification open for you is shocking. And it costs $0 to the business owner. It's an application process. It's data entry. Like it's not subjective. You don't have to go through an interview. Like if you qualify for it, you qualify for it. Like you have to give yourself the best chance that you can, because being a business owner is hard enough. Economic climate or not, it's going to be hard enough. And you have to give yourself all the best chances that you can. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't. So I would say small business administration certification is the number one thing that any business should be doing, let alone a veteran-owned small business or a woman-owned or minority-owned. That's the biggest takeaway that I want to give.
And audience mentorship and partnership through this whole thread of this conversation. That's what he's saying. And he's very successful. I'm not going to say how successful you can get if he's working with 78 top companies. He's not poor. He's not homeless. He's not trying to feed his kids every day. And I say that with, people say, it's hard. Yeah, it is. But you started no different than I did, or Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. You start from zero. You just got to execute. I'm going to start using that word because I love military words. I love military movies, so that's probably why. Let's end with a great question. I like to improv a little bit to get to know you a little bit more. So you have a reservation at a restaurant. There's a table of 4. You're going to sit obviously in one of the chairs. And the other 3 empty chairs, who would you invite, dead or alive? Why would you invite them to the dinner? And what food would you order?
Ooh, good questions. I would have to say George Washington, Gandhi, and Dave Chappelle.
What an eclectic group. I had to stop. Oh my God, what a great group.
Food, probably ribs, steak, potatoes. Keep it easy. Everybody likes one or all of those things. And then final question, conversation.
Well, why would they be invited? What were you thinking when you invited those 3?
I want to get their insight on the Red 7 strategy group and how it applies to the broader market for small businesses.
Nice. I like it. And I have to bring a 5th chair just from the food perspective. I mean, the group I'd love to listen to too, but the food is that would be very good. Well, you've been a great guest. I knew you would. I told you before the show, you're so humble, and a part of that's a military background, and you're helping vets, which more vets need to do, and people like me, civilians. Hey, guys out there, help vets. If I had a company today, half my staff would be vets. I'm telling you, they would work in the sales, they work all those, because you know what? They're so great to work with because they care, they're humble, and they're disciplined. And that's what we want for our staff. How can people find, because they've heard so much about you, how can they connect with you and support you?
So I can be found on LinkedIn, MatthewHKemp, Dialed In Staffing, and Red 7 Strategy Group. Pretty easy to find. Red 7 Strategy Group, all spelled out, is on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. There, I just have some pretty straightforward informational, educational content for veteran-owned small businesses and small businesses alike, focused on some of the things we've talked to or spoken to today. So that'd be the primary ones.
And you get to see his handsome face on TikTok every day. I don't know if he does it every day, but I get to see this good looking guy. I'm going to jump on just from the education standpoint. For you women, you might want to look. But with that being said, here's the thing, audience. What I think a podcast should be is this call to action. If you're listening, and it happens all the time, and you have a friend that's a vet that wants to start a business or has a business and maybe needs some help, send them this video, this link to this video, this podcast of Matt, because they get to learn his passion, his humbleness. He cares. He's got opportunities. He's got resources. If it resonates with them, then they can make a connection. I think it's the greatest gift we can do with a podcast, because guess what? You're serving that person. And if Matt can help them 5-10%, game changer. you've made that impact and difference. We come in full circle back to that. Also, to comment on the YouTube channel. If it's for Matt, I'll get the comments to him. If you need to connect, it'll be in the show notes, or reach out to me and I'll get you connected. And as always, I want to thank all of you. Me and Matt want to thank you for watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you all in the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.